Yeah, the bison story, and I tell it in several places. Sort of the advent of the bison story early in Wild New World, and then the sort of the denouement in a later chapter. But the modern bison is actually a dwarfed animal compared to the bison of the Pleistocene that succeeded those earlier larger forms about 8,000 years ago and very likely became dwarfed because of anthropogenic selection, human hunting pressure. Because only wolves and humans really are effective predators of bison. And what you get by becoming smaller is a quicker emergence as fertile. So bison that are smaller can have calves at an earlier age. When the cows are 2 years old or 3 years old, they can begin having calves. The gestation period is not as long for smaller animals, and so you're able to, in other words, these are advantages for reproduction. And this new bison, 8,000 years ago, essentially inherits the grazing niche on the American Great Plains that had formerly been occupied by all kinds of creatures that are now gone, including things like mammoths that are grazers just like modern African elephants are. And so as a result of inheriting a grazing niche now depopulated with no horses to compete with no mammoths to compete with, they become this huge mass. This is why bison multiply into the millions on the Great Plains. And in fact, they probably become so numerous, like passenger pigeons. This is one of the arguments for why passenger pigeons survive so long. They're so numerous that they saturate the predator possibilities. Predators just can't take enough of them to ever actually reduce their numbers. And so what happens, native people hunt bison modern bison for 8,000 years. That's the longest economic life way in North American history. But just about the time that Europeans are arriving, and very likely contributed to by the arrival of Europeans and the disease epidemics that wipe out so many native people, bison populations began to expand out of the Great Plains west of the Rocky Mountains. They get all the way to places like Oregon, Arizona, and east of the Great Plains when they get to places like Georgia and Florida and Virginia and West Virginia and possibly even western Pennsylvania. And the argument about this is when Europeans arrive and out of a hemispheric population, or I should rephrase that, out of North America and South America having a native population as high as maybe 56, 57 million people, most of which indeed are from Mexico south into South America where agriculture has prevailed. So many people like that taken out, which is more than 10% of the global population when the Great Dying happens. People who have been cutting down forests and building fires and using fires as their primary method of heating and cooking and everything else. When that ends, the recent idea advanced is that enables a reduction of carbon in the atmosphere formerly put into the atmosphere by all these burning fires of all these millions of people. And when that happens, it produces an effect called the Little Ice Age. And the Little Ice Age, which lasts for about 300 years, from about 1550 or so, somewhere in that range, around 1500 to 1800 or maybe 1830 or so, produces cooler, moisture weather in the northern hemisphere, and that grows more grass, and that expands the bison population over a lot of North America. So when Europeans get here, as a consequence of all these factors nobody really understands. I mean, nobody knows anything about disease transmission. Nobody suspects that your breath can kill people. I mean, there's an early European who I quote in the book who says, boy, we just experienced the strangest thing. We went ashore for a couple of weeks, and when we came back on board our ship, word came that every village, every Indian village that we went to, within 2-3 days of us being there, almost all the people in the village fell sick and they're dying. And it seems to have happened only where we went. Nowhere else is reporting this, but I mean, so it happens like that. I mean, just almost instantaneously. They don't understand why it's happening. The European idea is, well, he's killing them to enable us to settle the place. And they certainly don't understand what's causing, the little ice age. But what they're reaping the benefit of is this explosion of animals that even brings buffalo all the way almost to the East Coast.
Wow.
Yeah, it's another one of these amazing stories that, I mean, we've only been figuring this kind of stuff out